You've heard this one. Skip the coffee, invest the difference, and by retirement, you're sitting on a small fortune. It's been in personal finance books for 20 years. It's all over your For You page. And at this point, it's basically a personality trait for a certain kind of finance guy. And here's the annoying part. The math actually checks out. Spend $6 a day on coffee, invest that same $6 a day for 30 years at the stock market's long-run average return, and you land somewhere around $200,000. So the guy in your comments section isn't lying to you. He's just leaving something out. Because while you've been feeling guilty over a $4 oat milk latte, something much bigger has been quietly costing you that exact same $200,000, and somehow nobody's making a video about that one. Let's give the latte guy his due, because credit where it's owed. This isn't made-up math. It's just compound interest doing what compound interest does. Here's the simple version. Money invested in the stock market has historically grown around 7% a year after inflation, averaged out over long stretches of time. At that rate, your money roughly doubles every 10 years. Not because anything exciting happens, because it just sits there, compounding while you go about your life. So, take that $6 coffee, skip it every weekday, invest the roughly $30 a week instead, and let it ride for 3 decades. In year 1, it's a rounding error, maybe $1,500, nothing you'd text your friends about. But by year 15, the growth stops looking like your contributions and starts looking like the market's doing the work for you. By year 30, the number sitting there is over $200,000, and less than a third of it is money you actually put in. The rest is just interest earning interest, quietly for 3 decades, while you were busy living your life and probably forgetting this account existed. That's genuinely one of the more satisfying tricks in personal finance. And it's why this example refuses to die. It's clean, it's visual, and it makes for a great 30-second video. Here's my problem with it. Not that it's wrong, it's that it hands you a real, true, satisfying piece of math and points it directly at the smallest, most emotionally loaded purchase in your entire budget, while 3 much bigger numbers sit completely untouched, 2 inches to the left. Let's do the same napkin math on the stuff that's actually draining your account, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. The average new car payment in this country is now well over $700 a month. And a meaningful chunk of people financing cars right now are paying more than that. Compare that to a $6 coffee, and one car payment alone covers roughly 4 months of daily lattes every single month for as long as that loan runs. Then there's the quieter leak. Survey after survey asks people to guess their monthly subscription spending, then has them go pull up their actual bank statement and add it up. The guess is almost always low, sometimes by a lot. Streaming services, apps, storage upgrades, a gym membership from 2 apartments ago, a subscription box you signed up for during a slow Tuesday in 2023 and never thought about again. Individually, each one feels like nothing. A monthly rounding error, exactly like the coffee. Add in the newer version of this problem too. Buy now, pay later checkout buttons split purchases into small, practically invisible installments on purpose. Because a $100 order feels like nothing when it's 4 tidy payments of $25. Nobody's making a guilt video about tapping that button at checkout. It doesn't feel like debt. It feels like convenience, and that's exactly the point. Except, unlike the coffee, you're not choosing most of this spending on purpose every single day. You're not standing at a counter making a decision. It's just quietly leaving your account whether you're paying attention or not. And it adds up to real money over the exact same 30-year window we just used for the latte math. Run the forgotten subscription money through the same compounding math as the coffee, and it doesn't just match the latte number. In a lot of households, it blows past it, because the average person is bleeding more a month in stuff they forgot to cancel than they'd ever spend on coffee, even on a genuinely indulgent coffee habit. And here's what gets me. Nobody made a viral video with a calculator open, tapping through what your forgotten fitness app subscription costs you by retirement. Nobody's filming the car payment breakdown with the same dramatic music. The coffee gets the spreadsheet treatment, the car and the subscriptions get a shrug. The coffee just plays better on camera. It's small, it's visual, it's something you can hold up to a phone screen, and it lets the math work without anyone having to say the words. Your car payment is genuinely the problem, out loud, which is a much less comfortable video to make. I want to point at something, and I want to say it plainly instead of dancing around it. The purchases that get the guilt treatment in personal finance content skew very specific. Coffee, manicures, skincare, a brunch with your friends. The stuff that reads culturally as a small feminine treat. Meanwhile, the golf membership, the truck upgrade, the fourth monitor, the gear for a hobby that shows up twice a year, those get filed under normal adult spending, and nobody's running the compound interest numbers on them in a video with dramatic zoom-ins. Same category of decision. Wildly different amount of judgment attached to it. I did this to myself for an embarrassing amount of time, so I'm allowed to say this one. I once tracked every single coffee I bought in a notes app for an entire month, like I was building a case file. Wrote down the date, the amount, the little wave of guilt that came with it. Never once, in that same month, did I check whether I was still paying for a gym membership I hadn't used since before I got my current job. Found it eventually, $42 a month, gone for over a year, for a building I hadn't walked into in longer than I want to admit. That one line item alone would have bought a lot of coffee. I'm not telling you that story so you feel bad. I'm telling you because the coffee felt like the thing worth watching closely, and the gym membership felt like background noise, and that instinct wasn't really about the dollar amounts. It was about which spending had been trained into me to notice. Here's the reframe, and I mean this one. You didn't do anything wrong by wanting a coffee or a manicure or a brunch with your friends. This isn't a discipline problem, and it was never really about willpower. It's about which costs are actually big enough to move your future and which ones just make for a satisfying 30-second clip. Those are two very different lists, and they don't overlap nearly as much as the algorithm wants you to think. So who keeps this story alive? Because Skip the Latte has been getting debunked in comment sections for a decade now, and it just will not die. There's a reason for that. And it's not that it's secretly true after all. It survives because it's the easiest possible video to make. One calculator, one cup of coffee, one dramatic zoom on a number. No research required, no uncomfortable conversation about wages or rent needed, and absolutely nobody in a position of power gets annoyed by it. A car dealership isn't losing sleep over a video telling you to skip your latte. A landlord raising rent every renewal certainly isn't. Compare that to the video nobody's making, the one where a creator sits down and explains that rent has climbed dramatically faster than wages over the last couple decades, that the average car payment has quietly ballooned into a second rent check, and that credit card companies make their real money off the people who can only afford the minimum. That video requires actual research. It risks sounding political. And it doesn't let anyone feel like the problem was ever something they had full control over, which is a much less satisfying video to sit through than being one skipped latte away from being rich. It's a lot easier to build a whole content career on telling you to give up something small than it is to say out loud that the bigger numbers in your budget were never really yours to control in the first place. At least not without a much harder set of decisions. The latte is a distraction that happens to be true, and that combination is exactly what makes it so sticky. I'm not saying the guy telling you to skip your coffee is out here twirling a mustache. I think most of them genuinely believe it because they picked it up from the last person who said it, who picked it up from the person before that. It's been recycled so many times, nobody remembers it started as one guy's example in a book almost 20 years ago. It just kept getting repackaged because it works as a video. not because anyone tested whether it was actually the highest leverage thing in your budget. And the same feed that hands you the Latte calculator will, in the very next scroll, serve you an ad for the exact car loan or buy now pay later plan, quietly doing the real damage. That's not a coincidence you're supposed to think too hard about. The advice and the product it's distracting you from often come from the same platform, sometimes practically back to back. Okay? Here's where I'd actually point that calculator energy if I were you. First, run a real subscription audit, not a memory test. Pull up 3 months of bank statements and highlight every recurring charge. Not the ones you remember, the ones that are actually there. You'll almost always find at least one that should have been canceled a long time ago. Second, look at your big three before you look at anything else. Housing, transportation, and debt payments. Those three categories decide more about your financial future than every small daily decision in your life combined. And they're the ones almost nobody makes a video about, because there's no satisfying 30-second hook for renegotiating your car loan or calling your landlord about a lease renewal. Even a small move here, a slightly lower rate on a refinance, a shorter loan term, a roommate for a year, outweighs years of skipped coffee. Third, if you love your coffee, keep the coffee. Redirect the guilt audit energy you were spending on it toward the one recurring bill you haven't actually looked at closely in over a year. That's usually where the real money is hiding, not in the $4 purchase you're already fully aware of. Fourth, automate the small stuff instead of tracking it. Willpower is a terrible long-term strategy against anything you have to decide about every single day. A small automatic transfer that happens without you thinking about it will outperform a coffee tracking spreadsheet every single time, because it doesn't require you to win the same decision daily. And fifth, watch what happens right after a raise. That's usually when the big three quietly creep upward. A slightly nicer apartment, a slightly nicer car. And the raise disappears into fixed costs before you ever notice it landed. The coffee habit almost never grows to match a raise. The car and the apartment do, constantly. And that's where actual lifestyle creep lives. Before you upgrade either one, sit with the raise for a few months first and see what it feels like to just let it accumulate. None of this requires you to give up the small things that make your week better. It requires you to stop pointing the spreadsheet at the $4 purchase and start pointing it at the $700 one. So no, you don't need to give up the latte. The math on it was true this whole time, and it's still not the reason your savings account looks the way it does. The real numbers were always sitting right next to it. The car payment, the subscriptions nobody double checks, the rent that climbed faster than your paycheck did. Those are the ones actually deciding your future, and they've been sitting there quietly this whole time, uncalculated, because nobody made a satisfying video about them. You didn't miss anything by not catching this sooner. Nobody hands you this comparison on purpose. It's just not as good for views as a coffee cup and a calculator. If this saved you from feeling guilty about the wrong $4, subscribe, because I've got a lot more of these misplaced guilt myths to walk through, and your coffee was never the problem.